The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Depending upon where you're joining us from around the globe, I'd like to welcome you to the most recent edition of MSP Ignition. This is Robert Leak, Director of Marketing here at eFolder Accent, and really excited about today's topic. Of all the best practices, those that kind of impact the financials and the bottom lines, I think are something more interesting, and I am certainly looking forward to getting into this topic. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. We will be on mute only. So if you've got any questions that pop up, we'll certainly have some Q&A at the end, but streamline those in throughout the content as well. So just pop those questions into your GoToWebinar question pad there. Also, we are recording today's session, so this will be available. We'll send it to you in email. We'll also put it up on the eFolder and Accent YouTube channel, so we'll definitely make sure you have that available. We also have some giveaways and handouts that are available that we'll point to here a little bit later, but definitely want to make sure you have something taken away from today's experience outside of just the knowledge set. But as we get into that, what I'd like to do now is introduce my cohorts with me. First off, we have, one moment, just a slight technical difficulty here. Thank you, sir. We have joining me is really the host of MSP Ignition, Tom Watson, Director of MSP Best Practices. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Robert. Looking forward to today. This is going to be a topic I have a lot of interest in and hopefully a lot of knowledge for everyone.
Absolutely, thank you. And we have a special guest today, our Chief Executive Officer and existing MSP owner, even in Toledo, Ohio, Mr. Matt Nachtraub. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Morning, afternoon. I've run lots of businesses, so I have a lot of feedback into cash flow and the collections process overall, so I'm excited to kind of share that and then hear what you guys think of different ways to increase the cash in your business.
Wonderful. So before we get too far into that, I want to just give a quick overview. For those of you who have joined us, this will probably look somewhat similar. For the new attendees on the line to our MSP Ignition series, I want to just make sure that you have a good understanding of who we are here at eFolder and Accent. We are a data protection company. And while we focus on data protection at series like MSP Ignition, that we will have a lot of info, but really we are data protection, and that data protection is a suite of solutions. The suite of solutions really started with our original file, the backup product that is backup for files. It's what the company was built on and really grew upon for many years. But as the evolution of the marketplace and the evolution of the clients that MSPs were supporting, our leadership took that into consideration, saw a transition that was happening, and knew that backup for files was going to always be a great solution, but there was going to be a need for more. And that's when we started looking at other ways that we could add layers of protection to the MSP solution stack. First off, going down the road of file sync and share with Anchor, and I always hate calling it file sync and share because it is indeed so much more. It's a productivity tool, it's security and insurance against malware, it's a brandable solution that keeps your brand in front of your clients on a daily basis. We then also looked into the cloud world. Cloud Finder is a solution today that's built for Office 365 and gives you that extra retention that Microsoft doesn't, and that added protection for your clients for email, contacts, calendar, and SharePoint. Lastly, it's really becoming almost a cornerstone of our business, and that's the BDR side of the house. We actually have two different flavors, a change-free, location-centric, and Replicate, offering a lot of efficiencies in management of the solutions and the BDRs, as well as Accent, which I'll dive into a little bit more. It's our newest product to the solution suite, and a BDR that was built from the cloud down. So whether you're looking to recover databases, specific files, images, or go to a bare metal restore, and your clients have a serious need for continuity and minutes mean dollars in their world, you definitely want to give Accent BRC a try, because it is something that paired with the rest of our solutions brings an extra layer of data protection to your space. So wanted to, again, just make sure that we'll have an opportunity for you if you're looking to explore data protection and have some opportunities on the table, or just looking to review maybe what eFolder and Accent can do to you. We'll definitely have you a chance to let us know a little later in the program. But for now, let's get to the topic at hand. We have Tom, if you want to maybe talk us through what we're going to be going through today and what we're going to be looking at when it comes down to the money now is indeed better than money later.
Thanks, Robert. So today I'm pretty much focused on making sure you get paid. I had a blog post that was in Channel E2E last month that discussed this, and we're going to go into more detail today. In particular, we're going to cover 4 main things during this slideshow. First of all is the reason why you should require prepayment, and then get into how do you do this in your contract to make sure you're covered legally and so that you have communicated that properly to the client, and then talking about negotiating those payment terms. And then we have a takeaway that's going to be top 5 ways to get you paid. So 4x6 that you can download, put up in front of your desk. It's going to remind you things you need to do to make sure you get paid. And we're going to cover those in detail as well.
Wonderful.
So now we have a polling question. And this polling question, we're trying to establish whether or not our audience out there actually is getting paid in advance of rendering services.
So so right now that poll should be out and available. So if you could just take a few moments as you think about, again, how you're getting payments, is prepayment a part of your world? And we'll give that open for just a few minutes. So Tom, as we think about prepayment, is that something that you had incorporated a lot within your business?
It is not something I incorporated at first. When I first had my MSP, I had worked for an MSP before that, and one of the things I did was I bought a couple of contracts from the MSP, basically took over their book of business, and that they had done a very good job of getting prepayment. But I did not follow that at first. I actually was mostly getting paid probably 4 to 6 weeks after services were rendered. So I would send technicians out. Even on contracts I would do the work, or my technicians would do the work, and then we would go ahead and send an invoice out within 2 weeks or so, and then you're waiting 4 to 6 weeks to get paid. So you have this long time period between when you did the work and you got paid, and that actually worked out fine for quite a while until you start adding employees. And then, as I mentioned in my blog post, until the Great Recession happened. And that's when it became a real problem, because when people hold on to cash and don't pay you, well, they're trying to protect themselves, but it ends up putting a lot of other businesses under. And I ended up in a pretty bad situation, and that's when I went back and decided to restructure everything for prepayment of services, all on managed service agreements.
And it seems like our audience today may have had some similar experiences, and known that some, because the responses actually came back 30-70 that no, they're not requesting prepayment from their clients.
30% are?
30% are, 70% are not.
Right. That's actually the reason why we wanted to do this.
Yeah, and at Nemsys, we're kind of similar, my MSP in Toledo, where in the beginning, we didn't send invoices out till the end of the month, and it was for the prior month. And we shifted to prepayment. And part of that was because I went and I got my MBA. So one of the things while you're in MBA school, they do case studies of businesses. And we did a really deep dive case study into Dell, where we learned about how the founder, Michael Dell, really formed the company initially because he started with almost no capital. And he wanted to try to find ways that he could fund the business and grow the business without outlaying and investing in it. And so he negotiated contracts with all of his vendors that had long payment terms. He even got to the point where the payment date started when it came off the truck, and he had the people that he had as suppliers park the trucks in the parking lot, and so could wait to the last minute. And so he structured his whole business to where he used working capital techniques to get paid for the servers and workstations that he sold prior to him paying out to his customers. And so all the businesses I look at how do we work to make sure we get the money first and as soon as possible. That's where like the cash flow is king kind of comes from, is you really need to think about the leverage that you have by having cash in hand prior to delivering services. It's easy for customers to hold back payment when they're not happy with the service, but when you have the cash in advance, it's a lot harder for them to get that from you. Essentially, in the end, I mean, obviously you can give credits or give refunds, but if they really want to take that, they have to sue you. And so that's why cash is really king. Is you want that money in your bank account, and think about that as you're running your business.
And just curious, so obviously better now is better than later, and obviously from a cash flow perspective, this last bullet point, whether an MSP is really thinking about the exit of their business or not, I think the value of their business is always top of mind. How is this really having an impact on the value of an MSP?
That's a great point, because my feeling is whether or not you're going to sell, and I've talked about this before, You always want to be working towards increased valuation. And it's not only because if you want to sell, but if you, we were talking to Matt earlier about trying to grow at HAS services at an MSP. And one of the things you can do is if you're getting all your money up front, when you go talk to a bank and you want a line of credit or something else, they're going to look at you and say, wow, you got money in hand, you got beginnings.
Your bank's loan based on balance sheet. So if your balance sheet is strong
and
steady, it's easier for you to get loans. And what I think you always have to be thinking of exit. If any of you guys are members of HTG, it's a great peer group. And one of the first things you do there is you think about exit, because it can start to paint a picture of how you want to grow your business to become. And whether or not you use it, people that are looking at businesses look for healthy businesses, and it's a better way to run your business in a way that it is the way that the buyers in the industry look to want to buy.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm someone who's not a big believer in credit. Often you do need to grow businesses, but you can often grow slow and steady without taking money. And one of the big things I like to do is make sure I'm not paying bank fees of any kind. And if you look on the second one, avoid costly interest late fees. I would say to most people out there, a lot of you are probably buying your SaaS services, other ones on credit cards. If you look and you dig into that, you're probably paying some fees to have those cards or some late fees here and there. I just don't think you can avoid that, because a lot of times you're prepaying for it and you rack up. And then if you don't have that money up front from your clients, you're not paying that on time. And those late fees end up being thousands of dollars a year that you could have used somewhere else.
Okay, so avoiding late fees, cash getting in the door quicker is better. The valuation of the business is obviously going to be a nice benefit. Let's talk to the audience a little bit about how we're able to arm them and how they're able to arm themselves. And I think the first step is the contract.
Yeah, I think the contract's important. You want to have the legal language down. And I will say my mother was an attorney for many years. It helped me a lot, because it gave me the ability to understand that you better put this in the contract and protect yourself, because at some point someone will challenge you on it. And you need to have it in there several ways. First thing I have is I had a very short agreement portion of the contract that stated in bullet points what you're getting and what the expectation of the client is. And I had it in there. You're going to pay me on or before the first day of each month. But then also down below, you often have an addendum in your contract, terms and conditions, have it again in there. You're going to explain what the ramifications are if they don't pay, what's going to happen, so they understand. What's very important, I believe, is when you have things like this and when you go over the contract with a potential client, a prospect, then you need to go over these things in detail and show these.
Yeah, and one of the things too is since most people on the call don't have any sort of concept of prepay, it's okay to start with your new client. So if you're growing, hopefully you're bringing on new customers, you can put your agreement out now moving forward and have some of your customers prepaying you, and the ones that you haven't gotten to, you can cover at renewal time, or in a some sort of process where you do your QBRs or annual review with your customers to get them standard. But don't hold off doing it because of that. And so whether it's prepay with blocks or prepay a monthly service agreement that they have with you, you can get existing customers to shift over.
No, I agree with that. I agree. It's great to draw a line in the sand and say anyone new that comes in, this is the way we're going to do it. But absolutely, then design a way to go back on renewals and talk to your clients about this. This is a conversation, and many of them will understand it. We're going to get into that more in an upcoming slide. So negotiating, that's my big thing, is I repeat it from the first time I meet with them. I want them to understand, because there are a lot of the competitors out there for MSPs are going to be ones who do not require prepayment, and that might be an advantage when they value prop to who they're talking to. But I don't think it's something that's hard to get around, because most of these businesses that you're working with are going to prepay for other services they have, and they're used to this. The fact is that they go to the store, they buy things, they have to pay for them when they get them. They put them on a credit card, but they have to put some form of payment down before they are handed a product or a good or goods or services. And then many of them have lawyers on retainer. And I'll tell you what, any good lawyer you're going to have, unless it's a friend of yours, they're going to have a chunk of your money already in their pocket before they do any work, often holding that money. So they understand the retainer. If you explain it similar to a retainer, they will often get it right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think when I look at the beginning part, it's like early stages in a relationship. It's the euphoric, it's the best time. They're switching to you. and that's the time to get the arrangement set up right. If they do question it too much, you could start to really wonder, are they solvent? Are they do they have their are they really tight on cash? Because if they're not willing to do it, that can it can be a red flag to you. Is this the right type of customer that you want?
Or do they value their business? Because what you're providing them is an insurance policy of sorts. They want to know you're available and you have technicians available and you have the goods and services to solve their problems when they have an issue. And the only way you can do that is if you have cash in hand to run your business. And they should understand that, and you can tell them that's the value in paying.
Yeah, I like bullet 3 too. Is that it's saying, hey, a lot of the services a lot of the costs in your business you're prepaying for as well. You pay your rent on the first of the month. I don't know many that don't. But so that's a lot of that's like it's most MSPs that have an office space. That's probably your number one non-employee related cost, and you have to prepay for that. And so
don't be afraid to throw that in there and remind them they prepay for their rent.
Yeah, I think that telling them
insurance policies.
If they question, but most of the time I think you'll find that if you just say that's the way you operate and confidently, that nobody will question it.
Well, and I think, Matt, you brought up an interesting point, right, about the fact that if they're pushing back, and in normal negotiations, there's always some give and take. But if they push back too much on this piece, it might not be the type of client. And we hear in the MSP world, right, that there are some clients that are just bad clients. And whatever those thresholds are, this might just be one of the check boxes that you're going through as you're thinking about bringing on those new clients.
Yeah, you don't want clients that use their payables as a way to spread, that are always trying to push it later and later. You want clients to pay on time, and ones that have that intention won't question this.
Just one point real quick. When I went to this model, starting in 2008, 2009, I went from having only about 10% of my clients on prepayment to having 100% within 2 years. Now, I lost about 10% of the people I approached for this were existing clients, but that was fine because it ended up those ones that didn't want to sign on, they weren't really interested in running their business the same way I wanted to help them run it.
Well, and we'll move on, but we hear many times, right, that MSPs become more profitable after they fire a certain number of clients, and those are the clients that eat up the revenue, eat up their time, and eat up the profitability. So as it relates to once we get the right clients identified and we know that we're trying to go for prepayment, contracts, negotiations, let's talk about some steps that we're going to walk people through to really bring this to fruition.
So we came up with a takeaway, and as we said, that's available. It's a 4x6, and we're going to run through those right now in more detail. But these are just reminders to you and concepts that you get paid. The first is, in your contract, don't negotiate your standard service offerings or terms of payment to make this clear to the client. So my feeling was I had several standard plans. I had a silver, a gold, and titanium plans, and I would generally only bring 1 or 2 of those to the negotiation table with the client, and they were a set number of services that I offered, including your antivirus, hosted exchange, file sync and share, your service hours, backup, everything like that. And I would not take those off the list. I would say, this is what you get. Not everyone uses everything, and it's fine if you don't use everything. You're not really expected to, but you might need it at some point. But this is my standard offering, and I had to standardize because of the number of clients I have. At the same time, I don't negotiate my payment terms. And I run through the contract in detail, and I make it very clear that this is what I'm offering, and if you're interested, great. If you're not, that's fine too. But my feeling is it's the best way to run my business and the best way to run their IT, and they'll probably get it.
Yeah, standards.
Yeah, have a standard. Stick to it.
Okay.
So this is kind of what I was going through, is that during the contract negotiation, show them the payment terms and repeat it over and over again. You wouldn't believe how many people don't hear you when you say this. I mean, it's extremely important. But beyond that is the next part. I think Matt's going to speak to this, is what happens when they don't pay.
Well, you don't service them when they need help. It's. I know it sounds a little cold, but the truth is that there needs to be ramifications if they get behind, and they will. It'll make it so next time they won't get behind. That's really what it's about. It's not about being mean or cutting off the service and making that an example. It's about they know that if they get behind, that you're going to hold a line.
Now, did you ever have ones you kind of became friends with? And so that would kind of get in the way.
Nemesis started with my dad's businesses, which notoriously, they were always the slowest payers.
And it
was maddening. It was maddening because you look at your aged receivables report and the ones that are out there, and you just think, man, I'm looking at my bank account balance. I got $5,000 in it. I got payroll coming, and my 60, 90-day part of my accounts receivables is $80,000. Man, wouldn't it be great if I could shift that all into my bank account so that I don't stress about just making all the monthly payments. So yeah, we at Nemesis, we've shifted to all prepay, and we shut off service when there's not payment.
Yeah, I remember having some of us were friends having to get in the car and go over there and walk in and say, listen, I understand we're friends, but this is business, and I can't operate my business with you paying like this. And you'll hear all kinds of things like, but you have everyone else is paying you probably on time and all that. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have time to have to deal with this each time.
Follow up. It's a waste of time.
Make it clear, and then when they don't, do not give service without payment. So we're going to get into this on a later slide as well. So this is something I was very into. Now, offering discounts is not something I gave to everyone. I did not do promos on this. I might have done promos here and there on the block hours, but when I talk about this, I used to look at situations like at one point I wanted to upgrade my cloud that I kept in a data center. It's some pretty high-end hardware, need some new servers. It's going to be a lot of big cash outlay. I'm not into using financing for buying hardware. I like to own anything hardware related up front and then just appreciate it straight and not have to put it against, debt. So what I would do is I would identify on renewal a couple of clients that I knew were pretty well heeled. I trusted them. They trusted me, long-term relationship, and I would offer them, if they prepaid for an entire year up front, I would give them a month for free. This may seem like a big discount. It was often a couple $1,000s. But having that money, when you do the math on it generally, and you're not using finance to buy something where there's a lot of mistakes you can make, you have that cash up front, and you can do a lot with it, and it's just done. It's taken care of. But I would do that selectively, and I would never offer that to everyone. I would pick and choose and only do it when you really need the money. Because a lot of people will look at your cash flow and actually value your business higher if you have more MRR and not have it on a yearly basis, because people wonder, what are you doing with that money? You can get in trouble taking a bunch of yearly payments up front.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the people been on the call have been in the industry a while. There used to be a lot of this prepaid blocks, and I've seen a couple MSPs go under, and at the time they go under, they have a lot of prepaid blocks that are out there. You can end up with some pretty frustrated customers at that time. So you do need to make sure that you're careful with prepayment, that you don't do it for all of your services, because when times get a little rough, you don't want to have to worry about having that there. And so I like the way Tom thinks about it. Is maybe at the end of the year, if you want to invest in some hardware. Maybe your customers have some extra income they want to write off that they could put against their taxes right at the end of the year. Do a prepayment to pay for it, but don't do it too widespread.
Yeah, you get yourself in some trouble. You end up with a couple $100,000 in your pocket all at once. Yeah, you may not line that up against your bills for the next year.
Yes, just be careful.
So this is something I'd like to do too. On all of my managed service agreement invoices that went out, I tried to reiterate that this was prepaid, because as I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure there's people out there, someone might want to chime in with a question or a comment, people that just don't seem to be able to remember that they agreed to prepay you. And put it on your invoice. Everything we're referencing it, we're line item, references, prepaid monthly. So who the bookkeeper sees it, the bookkeeper's going to look at that. And it's at least going to in them say, hey, we got to prepay this.
They know what term they're paying this for. So
like you stated the terms in the invoice.
Coming month, yeah.
So little things like that mean a lot to make sure you get repaid. The constant reinforcement. This is a training process with any client you do it with, especially with the ones you convert over from having paid you after the service is done.
I haven't been in the weeds at Nemesis on this level, but when you did this, did you send out the bills? So you sent them a bill on the 1st for next month, and it was due on the 1st. When did you actually mail the bill or email the bill?
We use ConnectWise, the agreements feature, and we would send it right out from there in a batch email. And we generally do it. We try to do it on a Monday before the start of a month, so usually 3 to 5 days out.
And then they'd have to pay that before the start of the month.
Yeah, and we had a number of them on ACH. So we were hitting their accounts automatically, and that's helpful.
It wasn't after they got the bill.
Yeah, I avoided credit cards, of course, for obvious reasons, all the fees.
Well, the fees that they charge, plus at most, credit cards, you can just call in and say, hey, I don't agree with this charge. It's disputed.
Yeah, that's ugly.
They can just dispute, and then the credit card company just rip that right out of your account when there's a dispute.
So this is something I used to use selectively, and I had a couple clients. I mean, I remember one I had that was literally 200 yards away from my office, right across the parking lot. Of course, a friend of mine, never paid on time. But that was pretty easy because the next time we would just not respond, to the regular things and wait until they put a service ticket in, and we would make that into something that required an on-site for the service ticket. Because what you'll often hear, and I'm sure there's people out there that have this happen, someone doesn't pay you, and then they have a service ticket, and they think because it doesn't require an on-site, they can still get away with not paying you. Like, oh, let's just take a second, you guys can remote in and take care of it.
I just need my password reset.
Yeah. And I would say do whatever you can to make that an on-site. Everyone out there, either themselves or probably has a technician who's good about standing in front of people and not moving. And you stand in front of the front desk and say, that's great, I know you guys have a problem, but I'm going to need a check before I get started. And you'll probably have someone who can do that really well, or it might be yourself. But I will say, getting tough like this is important. And generally, you do it enough times, it'll work. You'll probably have some clients out there it never quite works with. And that's when you need to make a decision. Is this person worth my time? Is this company worth my time? Because this will chew up a lot of your time if you are becoming a collection agency.
So my mom was actually a landlord growing up, and she would put us to work as kids. And I remember her always saying that the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And some of this, like I mentioned earlier, is about kind of educating your customers that if they don't pay on time, they're going to be followed up with. They're going to, you're going to come on site asking for a check. And once it happens once, you kind of teach them, and then you just end up getting prioritized. You can have a lack of process. You cannot follow up. You cannot have any sort of process like this where they send them on. And then what you're going to end up being is you're going to be the last guy that gets paid. That's just what's going to happen. But if you are the squeaky wheel, you will get paid, and you'll get prioritized early because the person that processes the checks knows that you're going to be talking to them if you don't. So that kind of gets into what's on the next slide, which is the concept of a dunning process.
Now, just to add to that, if you notice that someone's writing you hand checks, you're getting different ones from different ones signing each month, it's late a lot, talk to them and say, hey, do you guys, I see you're banking with so-and-so. Have you thought about using their automatic payments? Something like that. Make suggestions if you want to get on ACH. Maybe throw them a couple hours here or something.
Yeah, Nemesis is 100% ACH.
That's incredible.
Everybody ACHs.
Yeah, I mean, ACH can be a little hassle to set up, and some people don't like it, but the fact is you're pulling out of their account, and that's probably the best way to get paid and avoid fees.
All right, and just as a reminder for everyone, so these 5 tips have been put in a nice 4x6 card that you can just download directly from the GoToWebinar agent. It's there under the handout section, so you can get that, again, just some nice friendly ways to make sure you stay on top of these issues. Now, Matt, you mentioned the dunning process a moment ago. We're going to go to the next slide. Talk about this a little bit for us.
Yeah, so I actually didn't know this term until this year when our CFO started talking about how we were implementing a new dunning process. Basically, what this is, if you Google it, it's the process and methodology for communicating with customers to ensure collections of accounts receivables. And I think every MSP should have some sort of process around this. Many of these can be automated. I know ConnectWise has a method of automating when payments are late. You can send an email automatically. Autotask has the same. But some of the issues with the automated ones within the standard PSA solution is that your link to your finance system may not be really solid. And there's a product called Connect Booster. If you guys don't use it, you should take a look. That has a lot of automation around it. But let me kind of I'll walk through this as just a basic one that maybe you could use. If someone's late, day one, you send an email that says they haven't received payment. maybe on day one at the same time you initiate an email to the assigned tech for that account that says, hey, next ticket that comes in, don't do it remotely, go on site because we haven't been paid. Day 5 automatically does an email reminder. And if you have someone in your company, which I do recommend, that's responsible for following up on people that are late, you add that to your internal assigned person's collections call list. And that company stays on that call list until the payment is made. And so it's not something that, we just do one phone call, leave a message. No, they have an active list of all the customers that are late, and they'll keep following up until they get off the list. Day 10 is a warning that says, hey, your service is going to be interrupted. And again, I'll just remind you, and I guess in the follow-up email on this webinar, I would check out Connect Booster because they've got some pretty awesome automation. We don't get anything from Connect Booster. I just have heard a lot of people that are happy with it, and they actually have some automation that can recharge a credit card if it bounced for some reason, can retry an ACH automatically. The idea on this, as much as you can, is have almost a set it and forget it process around collection, so you're not spending time, and it's automatically doing these reminders so your customers know, with the meat behind it of some sort of calling process if you don't. So I highly recommend every business that exists have a Dunning's process.
Yeah, and this is an example of a Dunning process. And what we did in my company is we would have, it takes a couple of days to figure out who paid, who didn't, check the mail, that kind of thing, see what it is and line it all up. What I would do is I would have my dispatcher, who someone who's good on the phone, they were used to talking to. I didn't want it to be too aggressive, so it was just that person would run down the list as soon as we knew and call those companies and talk to the person who's in charge of paying the bill and just say, hey, listen, this is just, I want to let you know we didn't receive your payment by the 1st, and our services do require prepayment for the month starts. And just a simple call like that was often all it takes. And they get that call usually once or twice, and that usually is enough for them to remedy their process.
Yeah, I think that there is a certain amount of anxiety that most people feel about calling and asking for payment. You're running a business, and once you implement a process where you're doing this on a consistent basis, the anxiety goes away.
And they understand too it's a process, and they understand that they got caught in the process because they didn't do something. A lot of people want to get out of that, and they often, and if you give them a way to do it, like even suggestions about how they're paying the bill, that will help.
Yeah, don't be embarrassed to call.
Don't be embarrassed to give them, you were there giving them suggestions on how to run a portion of their business. I found that I often was able to consult companies on other aspects of their business as well, because they already trusted me in a business role.
All right. Well, folks, we have talked a lot today as it relates to prepayments, getting money now, getting your finances as far in advance as possible. When we went down the road of kind of asking if you're doing it today, I think it was 30% said no, you're not doing prepayments today. I'm sorry, 70% said no, you're not doing that today. So up in front of you right now, we're just curious. As we've talked, as we've given you some tips, do you plan on incorporating this in your business? As Matt pointed out, I think there's some great opportunities to integrate it slowly, starting with those renewals, starting with the new content, your new clients, letting the existing kind of run through the process as they come to it. So again, hopefully you're walking away with some tips, certainly that card of reference, and curious just to know if you're planning on implementing those initial prepayments into your business.
Robert, I like to throw out there that I understand this is a process and it's difficult. It's hard to make this jump and have this conversation with people. And everyone's got my email address out there. Feel free to drop me an email, tomw@efolder.net. And if you want to talk about it, I have no problem picking up the phone and giving you a call and talking about especially those hard ones where you have a particular client and you want to maintain them, but how do you get to that point? I'd like to help people out there get towards this. This will completely change the way you do business and the value of your business. It'll put money in your pocket.
Wonderful. Well, Tom, if it makes you feel better, from the polling questions, we haven't received one no as far as they're moving forward. We've got about 30% that are not sure and 70% that are going to try to make this a reality and have prepayments as a part of their business. We'll close this.
So this is a little cool. They're pointed at me in the room. So yeah, it's nice to be liked, but it's far better to get paid. Shitloads of money. Is that a book, I assume, by Liz?
The song.
Yeah, a song. See, that shows you how much of a geek I am. I don't even know Liz. No, but I think part of being a business owner or a small business is doing some of the blocking and tackling basics that you have to do to run a business, and this is really one of those 101 things that most companies don't do very well. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope generally in our webinar series that we have around MSP Ignition is we want to give you real world practical advice that's from experience. And that you can really use in your business. So hopefully you can get paid.
Yeah, and this is going to turn into a chapter in the book as well. We've got all the material here, the blog post, and I will say go to Channel E2E, and if you type in money now, I think is all you need to type into the search. Mm-hmm. It's got my blog post from last month about this. It has couple other points we didn't quite get into in here, but I think it's important, and if you put this in your head and really think about it, you're going to realize this is the way to be able to scale your business.
So, gentlemen, I think we've covered everything pretty thoroughly. We've had most of the questions that have come in, we've touched on to some point. It sounds like we've already got final thoughts, but just one last call. Anything from that regard? So we've got some advice, the book that'll be coming here in the near future. This will be a part of it. This is as Matt mentioned, this is a part of our MSP Ignition series if you're first to join us. If not, either way, keep an eye out. Our next edition will be in 2 weeks. It will be focusing on the sales enablement side. So what we're talking about today with Tom is very much talking very much about the best practices and MSP specific, but we also have a second track that is all about sales enablement and helping you drive revenue and recognizing that revenue.
I think the next one with that is going to be in 4 weeks. It's going to be on peer groups.
That's correct.
Steve Alexander of, believe it or not, MSP Ignite.
Wonderful. So yeah, it's a great thing. MSP Ignite is actually a peer group that we've been introduced to thanks to MSP Ignition, and so we're both really out there trying to forward the MSP marketplace, provide best practices, and one of the best practices is certainly peer groups. So while in 2 weeks,
it's totally independent from MSP Ignition.
It's completely independent.
He has his own business, and he's actually writing a chapter with me of the book about the value of peer groups. We're looking forward to that.
That was
We're going to release that chapter.
I ran Nemesis. I started in 1999, and I didn't go to a single trade event until 2007 when we started actually rolling out lab tech software and talking to other MSPs. It was so awesome getting out there and talking to MSPs. So I don't know if you guys have gone to a trade event or if you're in a peer group, but I highly, highly recommend it. HTG was one I mentioned earlier.
And we're actually hoping to have HTG attend on that call as well. So we're definitely trying to get some additional diversity and bring as much as we can. So I think that's a great parting thought. Again, thanks to everyone who joined us today, and keep an eye out for some follow-up email from us. And we're going to also launch a survey at the end of this webinar. As soon as you close your GoToWebinar agent, that should pop up in your browser. Just a few questions, so we would definitely appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, we want the feedback. We want this to be valuable, so any feedback does help us figure out how we can get better.
All right. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.